My name is Gabriel Hayes. I'm 70 years old, and my working days are behind me. I used to be an engineer. Not so long ago, my son Matt and his wife Nicole found a house they absolutely had to have. It was a beautiful home, no doubt about it, the kind of place that costs $600,000. They were so excited when they came to see me. They didn't just ask for my opinion, though. They handed me a mortgage application, and my name was already printed on it as the main borrower. "You've put away plenty of money over the years, Gabe," Nicole told me. "Don't you think it's time you helped your own family?" I looked at my son, my only child, the boy I watched grow up. I saw the hope in his eyes and the pressure from his wife, and I looked him right in the eye, and I told him, "No." That single word set off a chain of events I never could have imagined. They didn't just get angry. They took me to court. They sued me for the full $600,000, and that wasn't the worst of it. They told the court I was losing my mind, that I was a confused old man who was a danger to himself. But when we stood before the judge, she saw right through their story. She looked past all the lies, and she focused on me. And she asked one simple, powerful question that completely shattered their entire plan. Before I tell you what that question was, and how everything turned out, I'd really love to know who's listening to my story tonight. Please, let me know in the comments where you're from. And if you believe, like I do, that family should be built on love and respect, not on what you can take from each other, then please show your support. It all started on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning. I was in my kitchen, trying to fix my coffee maker. The little spring in the filter basket had finally given out after years of loyal service. It was an old machine, a real trooper. My late wife, Alice, used to get so frustrated with it every morning, but it always managed to brew a good, strong pot of coffee. At 70 years old, I find a lot more satisfaction in fixing the things I already have than in figuring out how to use all the new gadgets they sell these days. I was bending a piece of 18-gauge wire into a rough replacement coil when I heard the back door swing open. No knock. These days, only one person feels that comfortable just walking into my house. "We're here." It was Nicole's voice, sharp and much too loud for a quiet morning. She swept into my small Oregon kitchen like a storm. She was all perfume and bright, expensive-looking clothes. My son, Matt, followed behind her, looking like he always did these days, like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Nicole was holding a bottle of wine with a fancy French name I couldn't begin to pronounce, all wrapped up with one of those gold ribbon bows. "Brought a little something for you, Gabe," she said in that chirpy voice of hers, setting the bottle down on my Formica countertop. I just looked at it. That bottle had to have cost $80. Easy. "You know I don't drink, Nicole," I said. She let out one of her laughs, a high, brittle sound that always felt like fingers on a chalkboard to me. "Oh, silly me." I forgot. Alice was the one who enjoyed a nice glass of wine, wasn't she? She waved a hand dismissively. "Oh well, you can always save it for when you have guests." Guests? What guests? Since Alice passed away 5 years ago, this house has been quiet. She knew that. This bottle wasn't a gift. It was a message. It was her way of reminding me that she didn't know a thing about me, and she couldn't be bothered to learn. It was like she was saying, the old way of doing things is over. I'm in charge now. Matt, my 42-year-old son, who lately looked like he was 50, finally found his voice. His eyes kept darting around the room, never settling. "How's the coffee maker coming along, Dad?" "It'll live," I grunted, keeping my focus on the wire in my hands. I didn't really want to look at them. Their visits were never just friendly drop-ins. They were always missions. "That's good," Nicole chimed in, stepping right between me and my workbench, physically blocking my view. "Because we have the most amazing news. It's truly life-changing." I put my pliers down. I knew this tone of voice. When Nicole said life-changing, It always meant something was going to be expensive, and amazing meant she wanted something. "We found it, Gabe," she said, her eyes wide with a kind of fake, theatrical joy. "The perfect house." I waited. I'm an engineer by training. I don't jump to conclusions. I wait for all the facts to be presented. I've spent my whole life looking at stress points, weak joints, and flawed designs. And my daughter-in-law, Nicole, was the most poorly designed system I had ever come across. All shiny surface, with nothing solid holding her up. "It's up on Claremont Hill," she gushed, pulling out her phone to show me pictures. 4 bedrooms, a garage that fits 3 cars. There's even a little guest house out back. It's perfect for us. "Sounds expensive," I said, wiping the grease from my hands onto an old rag. "It's an investment, Dad," Matt corrected me quickly, stepping forward. "It's what we've always talked about. A real family home, a place for grandkids. Eventually." I looked at the two of them. Married for 10 years, no grandchildren in sight. Just a lot of talk about building their brand and living their best life. And their best life always seemed to be paid for with credit cards that I strongly suspected were maxed out. "Well, son, congratulations," I said, and I turned my attention back to my coffee maker. As far as I was concerned, the conversation was over. "Ah," Nicole said, and her voice turned as cold as ice water. "That's the other part of the good news." She stepped forward again, this time blocking the light from the window over the sink. From her designer handbag, a thing that probably cost more than my entire monthly pension check, she pulled out a thick, professionally bound set of papers. She slid it across my kitchen table, scattering the tiny screws I had laid out from my coffee maker. "We need you to sign this," she said, her smile bright and hard as a diamond. I let out a long sigh. I picked up the document. It was heavy. I pulled my reading glasses from the pocket of my shirt, wiped a smudge off one lens, and put them on. I was expecting to see a co-signer application. I was braced for a request for a loan or a gift, something I could politely but firmly turn down. What I saw on that page stopped my heart cold. It wasn't a co-signer form. It was a complete mortgage application for $600,000. $600,000. My own house, this little cottage, was paid off. I hadn't had a mortgage in over 30 years. I live on my pension and careful withdrawals from my 401k. It's enough for me. It's comfortable, but it is not $600,000 comfortable. I turned the page. My fingers, still stained with a little grease, froze over the section for the applicant's information. My blood turned to ice. The name typed neatly in the box labeled primary borrower wasn't Matt's. It wasn't Nicole's. It was mine, Gabriel Hayes. I took my glasses off. I rubbed the bridge of my nose hard, like I could push the image out of my mind. I put my glasses back on. The name was still there. They weren't asking me to help them buy a house. They were asking me to buy it for them. The kitchen, my kitchen, suddenly felt small and hot and suffocating. The steady ticking of the clock on the wall, the one Alice found at a flea market 30 years ago, suddenly sounded incredibly loud. Tick, tock, tick, tock. I looked up at them. "I don't understand," I said. My voice came out flat. And when my voice gets that quiet and that flat, people who know me understand that it's a dangerous sign. Matt started pacing with that nervous shuffle he does when he feels trapped. "Dad, it's just a formality, really. The bank, they like your financial picture better. You're stable, you're retired. You have the 401k, the pension. This house is all paid off." Nicole cut him off. Her sweet, chirpy voice was gone, completely replaced by the tone of a corporate CEO launching a hostile takeover. "Gabe, let's all be adults here," she said. She sat down at my table, leaning forward, all business. "You're 70. You're all set. Alice, bless her heart, is gone. You live alone in this this big house. I looked around my 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath, 1,500 square foot cottage. It was a lot of things, but a big house wasn't one of them. It was just my home. You've saved enough, she continued, her voice like a handful of sharp little pebbles. You worked your whole life. What's the point of all that saving if you don't ever use it? It's time to help your family. It's time for you to invest in us. Invest. There was that word again. Alice and I had invested. We invested 45 years in this community. We invested in raising the boy who was now standing in my kitchen, unable to look me in the eye. We invested by living within our means, not far beyond them. I looked down at the paperwork again. $600,000. A 30-year loan. I would be 100 years old by the time it was paid off. They weren't asking for an investment. They were asking for my entire financial future. They were asking for my security, my peace of mind, the nest egg Alice and I had built together, brick by brick, so that I would never, ever be a burden on him. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. I didn't look at Nicole. I looked at my son. Matt, I said, look at me. He stopped his nervous pacing. Slowly, very slowly, his eyes, Alice's eyes, lifted from the cracked linoleum floor. They were filled with a desperate, pleading weakness that I recognized. It was the same look he had when he was 10 years old, and he'd broken old Mrs. Henderson's window with a baseball. It was the same look he had when he was 20 and wrecked my pickup truck. It was the look of a boy who knew he was wrong, but was desperately hoping someone else would come along and fix it for him. "Did you read this?" I asked, tapping the document with my finger. Nicole thinks—" "I am not asking what Nicole thinks," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a razor. "I am asking what you think. You are 42 years old, Matt. Do you think this is acceptable? To bring this here? To ask your 70-year-old father to sign away his financial security for a house you know you can't afford?" "It's not like that, Dad," he protested, but his voice had no strength behind it. She just really wants this house. You don't know how important this is to her." And there it was, the final terrible truth. My son was gone. The boy I raised, the man I thought I knew, had been replaced by this puppet. He was putting his wife's wants ahead of his own father's life. He was willing to sacrifice me, his 70-year-old father, on the altar of his wife's ambition. I folded the document neatly in half. The sound was crisp and final, like the crack of a judge's gavel. I slid it back across the table. It stopped right in front of Nicole. "No." The word just hung there in the air between us. The faucet was still dripping. Drip, drip, drip. Nicole's perfectly made-up face went through 3 different phases in less than 2 seconds. First, confusion, as if the word no was from a foreign language she didn't understand. Second, offense, as if I had just slapped her across the face. Third, a cold, hard rage that made her eyes look like little chips of blue ice. "What?" she whispered, her voice tight and strained. "I said," I repeated, enunciating every single syllable, "no." Matt looked like he was about to be sick. "Dad, please. You can't just say no. We already put down a deposit. We told the realtor you were on board. A deposit. With what money? My money, I suspected. Money they had probably been slowly siphoning from me for years. "Then you'd better call that realtor," I said, turning my back on them. I walked over to the sink. "You'd better call him and tell him you lied." I turned on the water, rinsing out my coffee mug. "If Nicole wants that house," I said, my voice a little muffled by the running water, "then you two can figure out how to buy it yourselves." "You selfish old man," Nicole shrieked. All the fake civility was gone now, stripped away. I turned around slowly, drying my hands on the towel. "Get out of my house," I said. "What?" I said, "Get out." Matt, finally finding a little bit of spine, grabbed his wife's arm. "Nicole, come on, we're leaving." "No!" She yanked her arm free from his grasp. She pointed a shaking finger right at me. "You are just sitting on all that money Alice left you. You're letting it rot. We are your family." "A family doesn't ask its father to sign his own financial death warrant," I said, walking toward them. Nicole snatched the mortgage papers off the table. "You will regret this, Gabe. I promise you, this isn't over." "I'm sure it's not," I said, holding the back door open for them. They stormed out. The screen door slammed shut behind them, the old wooden frame rattling in protest. I heard their car engine roar to life, and the sound of tires spinning on the gravel of my driveway as they sped away. I stood there for a long moment, just listening, until the sound of their car faded completely into the distance. I went back to the counter. The $80 bottle of wine was still sitting there. I picked it up, walked out onto the back porch, uncorked it, and poured every last drop onto Alice's struggling rose bushes. Then I sat down on the old porch swing. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline coursing through me. Nicole was right about one thing. This wasn't over. It was only the beginning. I stayed out on that back porch for a long, long time. I stayed there long after their car had screeched out of my driveway, leaving a black mark on the gravel and a cloud of dust hanging in the air. I listened until the sound of their engine was completely gone, and it felt like they had taken the last little bit of peace my family had with them. I looked at the expensive bottle of wine Nicole had left on my counter. I picked it up, walked back outside, and poured every last drop of it onto the patch of weeds by the porch steps. I didn't want a single reminder of them in my house. The next 2 days were quiet, too quiet. The silence in the house felt heavy, like a blanket you couldn't kick off. It was suffocating. On Wednesday afternoon, I called Matt's phone. It went straight to voicemail. "Son," I said, my voice sounding rough, "it's your father. We need to talk." I hung up. He didn't call back. I tried again on Thursday. Straight to voicemail again. This time, I didn't bother leaving a message. I am a 70-year-old man. I have earned a few things in my life. I will not beg my own son to speak to me. A part of me, the father part, tried to make excuses for him. He's embarrassed, I told myself. He's ashamed. He's at home getting an earful from that woman he married. I told myself they just needed a little time to cool off. They needed to come to their senses and realize how insane, how deeply disrespectful their request had been. I tried to believe that the son I raised, the boy I taught to ride a bike and bait a fishing hook, would eventually remember who he was. I tried to believe that the bond of family was stronger than Nicole's ambition. I was wrong. The proof arrived on Friday. I walked down my long gravel driveway to get the mail. The Oregon air was crisp and damp, the kind of weather that always makes my old joints ache. The mailbox door creaked as I opened it. Inside was the usual stack of junk mail, an ad for gutter cleaning, the local weekly paper, and one thin, official-looking envelope that didn't belong. It was from Bank of America. My heart tightened into a hard little knot in my chest. I hadn't done any business with Bank of America in 30 years. Not since Alice and I moved all our accounts to the local credit union. I tore the envelope open right there at the end of my driveway. My eyes scanned the page. It was a form letter, cold and impersonal. Dear Gabriel Hayes, we regret to inform you that we cannot approve your application at this time. Application? I hadn't applied for anything. I read further down. Your recent application for a $20,000 home equity line of credit has been declined due to recent suspicious activity on your credit profile and insufficient income verification. I read the letter again, and then a third time. A line of credit. Against my house. The house I paid off back in 1997. The house they had just tried to get me to mortgage for them. This was no coincidence. This wasn't some computer error. This was their plan B. That cooling off period I had imagined? It wasn't that at all. It was a regrouping. It was a rearming. The cold, analytical anger I had felt when I saw my name on that mortgage application came flooding back, 10 times stronger now. This wasn't just pressure. This wasn't just a disrespectful request. This was fraud. This was theft. They hadn't just stormed out of my kitchen, defeated. They had gone straight home, logged onto a computer, and tried to steal from me. They had tried to use the equity in my own home, behind my back, to get the money they wanted so badly. And the only reason it failed was because I was a retired man living on a fixed pension. Insufficient income verification. They had tried to get a loan using my identity, but they didn't have my real current financial information to make it work. I crumpled the letter in my fist. The silence of the past 3 days hadn't been shame. It had been calculation. I stood there by my mailbox, the empty country road stretching out in front of me. I finally understood. I wasn't dealing with a spoiled son and his greedy wife anymore. I was dealing with criminals, and they had just made their next move. It was time for me to make mine. I turned around, marched back up the driveway, and went straight to the phone in my kitchen. I wasn't calling Matt. I was calling my bank's fraud department, and I was going to find out exactly what they had done. I didn't even go back inside the house. I stood right there on the gravel driveway, the damp Oregon air chilling my hands, and I dialed the 1-800 number printed on the letter with a thumb that was shaking, not from the cold, but from a cold, hard rage. The phone clicked. A robotic voice answered. "Thank you for calling Bank of America's Fraud Protection Department. I hate these automated menus. They're designed to make you give up. I just punched the 0 button over and over again until a real, live human being finally picked up. Fraud Department, this is Susan. How can I help you?" Her voice sounded bored. She'd probably already taken 100 calls just like mine today. "My name is Gabriel Hayes," I said, my voice steady, deceptively steady. "I'm holding a rejection letter for a $20,000 line of credit that I never applied for." "Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that, sir." Her voice clicked into a professional, sympathetic script. "That must be very upsetting. Let me pull up your file. Can you please confirm your social security number for me?" I recited the 9 digits, the 9 numbers that define your entire life in this country. Saying them out loud to a stranger because my own son had tried to use them felt like a violation. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes. One moment, please." I heard the sound of her typing on a keyboard. The silence on the line stretched out, filled only by the sound of my own blood roaring in my ears. "Okay," she said, her tone suddenly more alert. "Yes, I see the application here. It was submitted online at 7:42 p.m. this past Tuesday." Tuesday? The very same day they had stormed out of my kitchen. They hadn't even waited 24 hours. They must have driven straight from my house, furious and rejected, and immediately logged on to try and steal from me. The audacity of it, the speed of it. It took my breath away. "Mr. Hayes?" Susan said, pulling me back to the present. "I'm here," I said, my voice like gravel. "I want to know what information was used to submit this application." "Sir, I can't—" "Susan," I interrupted, but I kept my voice calm. "I am the victim of identity theft. I need to know how compromised I am. Tell me what they used." She hesitated. "I understand. I'm noting the account for fraud." "Okay. The application was submitted using your correct full name, Gabriel Elias Hayes, your correct date of birth, and the correct social security number, of course." But that wasn't enough. There are always security questions. "What else?" I pressed. "What did they use for verification?" "The security questions." "Mother's maiden name," she said. There was another pause, more typing. "Yes, sir. The applicant did correctly provide your mother's maiden name." I closed my eyes. The world went silent. The wind in the pine trees, the distant hum of the highway, it all just faded away. Mother's maiden name. I hung up the phone. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say thank you. I just let my arm drop to my side. I'm an engineer. I'm a man of systems, of logic. I shred my bank statements. I burn my old tax returns in the wood stove. My 401k documents are locked in a fireproof safe in my closet. I am not a careless man. You don't find a man's mother's maiden name on a piece of junk mail. It's not on a utility bill. It's not something you just stumble across while rummaging through a desk drawer. It's something you know. And I knew, with a certainty that settled in my gut like a block of cold lead, that only one other person on this earth besides me knew that name. Matt. I remembered it clearly. It wasn't 3 years ago. It was 5. Right after Alice died. I was a ghost, walking through this house but not really present. The grief was a thick fog I couldn't see through. Matt had offered to help me with all the paperwork, the life insurance, the final taxes. He sat right there, at my very kitchen table. "Dad," he'd said, "this form, the insurance claim, it needs your mother's maiden name." I was so lost, so broken, I didn't even think. I just told him. Kovac, Anna Kovac. Her family was from Hungary. He had nodded, written it down. "Got it, Dad. Don't worry about a thing. I'll handle all of this." He handled it all right. He took that piece of my history, that piece of my trust, given to him in my absolute darkest moment, and he saved it. He saved it for 5 years. He saved it like a weapon. He held on to that key, that secret, just waiting for the day he could use it to rob me. This wasn't some impulsive act of anger on Tuesday night. This was premeditated. He had been planning for this. Or at the very least, he had been holding the tools to do it, just in case he ever needed them. This was a different kind of evil. My son, the boy I raised, was a stranger. A cold, calculating stranger who had been waiting for his opportunity. I looked at my house, my home. Suddenly, it didn't feel safe anymore. I thought about Tuesday, Nicole's big handbag, Matt's nervous energy. I needed to know what they had done while they were here. I needed to know what they had taken. I stood on the gravel, the useless phone heavy in my hand. The letter from the bank felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. Kovac. Anna Kovac. He had kept that name, that sacred piece of my past, like a burglar keeps a skeleton key, waiting for the right moment to use it. I looked at my small house. The white paint was peeling a little. The porch swing Alice loved was sagging to one side. It had always been my sanctuary. Now it felt like a crime scene. If they had my mother's maiden name, what else did they have? The mortgage application, the line of credit. They would have needed proof of my assets. They would have needed my 401k statements, my pension details. My blood turned to ice. Tuesday. They weren't just here for a quick visit. They were here for a whole hour. I walked fast across my patchy lawn to my neighbour's house. Agnes Henderson had lived next door for 45 years. She and Alice had shared countless cups of coffee over our shared fence. Agnes was 72, sharp as a tack, and she didn't miss a thing. She was watering her prize-winning azaleas, her back to me. "Agnes," I called out. My voice was rough. She turned, and her face immediately creased with concern when she saw me. "Gabe." "Goodness, you look like you've seen a ghost. Come in. I just made a pot of coffee." "No, Agnes, I can't stay," I said, gripping the top rail of her fence. My knuckles were white. "I need to ask you something. It's important." She put down her watering can. "Anything, Gabe?" "You know that." Tuesday, last Tuesday, I had a cardiology appointment in Portland. I was gone all morning. "I remember," she said, nodding. "I saw your truck leave early." "Did you—" I started, my stomach churning. Did you see anyone come by the house while I was gone? Agnes's face clouded over. She looked uncomfortable. Oh, Gabe. I didn't want to say anything. I assumed you knew. I thought he was just helping. Who, Agnes? I pushed. Who was it? It was Matt, she said, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. Him and his wife, Nicole. They got here about an hour after you left. I was pruning these very bushes, and they went right on inside. He used his key? Yes, I almost waved, but, well, Nicole seemed to be in a bit of a hurry. They were in there for a long time, Gabe, almost a full hour. I thought it was odd. I figured they were just dropping something off for you, but they stayed so long. I just stared at her, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying speed. Agnes, I said, trying to keep my voice even. When they left, were they carrying anything? Agnes frowned, thinking. Her eyes unfocused a little as she replayed the memory in her head. Yes, they were. Matt was just Matt. But Nicole, she was carrying that big beige tote bag she always has, the one that looks like it costs a fortune. She paused. You know, it's funny. It looked heavy, stuffed full. I could see the corners of papers, folders, sticking out the top. I remember thinking, my, that girl must be bringing work home, but I just figured they'd picked up your mail for you. Stuffed full of papers. I couldn't breathe. Thank you, Agnes, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I turned and started walking back to my house. Gabe, is everything all right? She called after me. I didn't answer. I just raised a hand in a weak wave of acknowledgement. My walk turned into a jog. I fumbled with my keys at my own back door, the same door Matt and Nicole had walked through so easily just days before. I burst into the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I didn't go to the safe. That's where I kept the truly important documents, the ones that really mattered. No, I went to the one place a son should respect, the one place a child should never ever violate. I went to my office. It was more of a nook, really. A small room off the living room where Alice used to keep her sewing machine, and I kept my old roll-top desk. This was where I paid my bills. This was where I kept the paperwork for my day-to-day life. I pulled open the bottom drawer of my metal file cabinet. It didn't screech. I keep it well oiled. I'm an engineer. I take care of my tools. But the contents, to a stranger, it might have looked perfectly normal. But to me, it was a mess. I am a man of systems. My files are strictly alphabetical. Auto insurance, bank statements, house deed, medical, pension. The pension folder was filed behind the taxes folder. The bank statements folder was shoved in front of the auto insurance folder. They had been here. They had been in this drawer. I pulled the folders out one by one, my hands shaking so badly I dropped a few on the floor. The pension folder, empty. The 401k statements folder, empty. The tax returns folder. They'd taken the last 5 years. I sank into my old wooden desk chair. It groaned under my weight. They didn't just try to steal my identity. They had stolen it. They had come into my home, my sacred space, and rifled through my private life. They had taken the proof of my assets. They were building a case. The mortgage application wasn't Plan A. The fraudulent line of credit wasn't Plan B. They were a coordinated attack. They were trying to find out exactly how much I had, where it was all kept, and how they could get their hands on it. The $600,000 house? That was just what they thought they could get. Now, armed with my 401k statements, my pension details, they were coming back for the rest. I looked at the phone on my desk, the old beige rotary phone that Alice had refused to get rid of. I felt so alone, so utterly and completely alone. This was bigger than me now. This wasn't a family squabble. This wasn't a spoiled son. This was a conspiracy. I picked up the receiver. My fingers, still stained with a little grease and now shaking with a fresh wave of rage, fumbled on the dial. I couldn't call the police. Not yet. Not on my own son. But I knew who to call. The one man Alice had trusted almost as much as she trusted me. The only other man on earth who knew the whole truth. "Peterson Law Offices," a crisp, professional voice answered. "Get me Peterson," I said, my voice breaking. "Tell him it's Gabe Hayes. Tell him it's happening." I didn't bother changing my clothes. I still had grease under my fingernails from that morning's coffee maker repair. It felt like a lifetime ago. I grabbed my keys, walked past my ransacked file cabinet, and didn't look back. The engine of my 1998 Ford F-150 turned over with a familiar, comforting groan. It was an old truck, reliable and honest. It had dents and scratches, and every single one told a story. It was a truck that had never lied to me. I pulled onto the 2-lane highway, heading east toward Portland. The 90-minute drive was usually something I enjoyed. I'd listen to the oldies station, watch the tall Oregon pines blur past, and think about what Alice would have wanted for dinner. Today, there was no music, just the steady thrum of the engine and the deafening roar of my own thoughts. $50 million. And my son was in there, trying to steal a few thousand from my 401k. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I thought about Matt as a boy. I remembered his 10th birthday. He wanted the new Nintendo system. All his friends had one. We didn't buy it for him. Instead, I took him out to my workshop, and we spent a whole month together, designing and building a Pinewood Derby car from a block of wood. He cried about it at first. He was so disappointed. But when that little car of his won first place at the pack meeting, the look on his face. It wasn't the simple joy of getting something. It was the deep, glowing pride of building something, of earning something. That's what Alice and I had wanted for him. We wanted him to feel that. We wanted him to learn how to stand on his own 2 feet. We had always agreed on that, Alice and I. We talked about it on countless nights, sitting at that same kitchen table. We saw what money did to other families. We saw our friends, the Martins, whose son was in and out of rehab, his life funded by a trust fund he never had to work for. We saw the Johnsons, whose daughter hadn't worked a day in her life and treated her parents like her personal staff. "We can't let that happen to Matt, Gabe," Alice had said, her voice firm, as we sat at the kitchen table signing the final trust documents all those years ago. "He has to be his own man. This money, it can't be a gift. It has to be a responsibility, or it will be a curse." So we kept the secret. We lived on my engineer's salary. We saved. We bought our modest house. We drove used Fords. We lived a good, simple, American life. And all the while, that other life, the $50 million life, was just sitting there, waiting, growing in the dark. Now, as the skyline of Portland pushed up against the grey sky, I felt a cold knot of doubt tighten in my stomach. Had we been wrong? By trying to protect him, had we just made him hungry? By keeping him from the truth, had we accidentally created this resentment? Did he look at his simple, retired father and feel nothing but contempt? Did he think I was just a foolish old man, hoarding a small nest egg, when all this time I was guarding a fortress he couldn't even see? I didn't know. I didn't know the man who had rifled through my desk. I didn't know the man who had used the paperwork from his dead mother's insurance claim to steal my own mother's maiden name. I only knew one thing for sure. He was my son, and he had declared war on me. I pulled into the parking garage under Peterson's law firm. I didn't have a plan, but I had the truth, and I had a $50 million problem. Peterson's law firm, Peterson, Shaw, and Associates, took up the top 3 floors of the tallest glass tower in Portland. It was the kind of place that smelled like old money, new coffee, and expensive carpet cleaner. The receptionist, a young woman in a sharp black blazer, looked at me over the rim of her glasses. I knew exactly what she saw. A 70-year-old man in a worn flannel shirt, jeans that were a decade old, and work boots that still had a little mud caked on the heels. I probably looked like I'd wandered into the wrong building, maybe looking for the janitor's closet. "Gabriel Hayes to see Mr. Peterson," I said, my voice quiet. Her eyes widened just a fraction in surprise. She checked her computer screen. "Oh yes, Mr. Hayes. Of course. He's expecting you. Right this way, sir." That "sir" was sudden, a quick pivot from dismissal to deference. Peterson had clearly flagged my name in their system. I was led through a maze of quiet hallways with beige walls and abstract art that probably cost more than my truck, until we reached a corner office with a floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over the entire city. And there, sitting behind a desk so large it could have doubled as a small boat, was John Peterson. Peterson was my age, but he looked like he'd been carved from a block of granite. Sharp suit, perfect posture, a mind like a steel trap. He'd been my friend since our college days, long before the money, long before any of this. He was the only man on earth I trusted with the whole, complete truth. He stood up as I entered, a genuine smile on his face that faded the second he saw my expression. "Gabe," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm, solid. "You look like hell. What's happened?" I didn't answer him. I didn't sit down. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket, and I pulled out the folded, crumpled mortgage application and the letter from Bank of America. I laid them side by side on his pristine, polished mahogany desk. The greasy smudge from my thumb on the bank letter stood out like a dirty scar. Peterson put on his own reading glasses. He picked up the mortgage application first. I watched his eyes scan the page, his expression hardening as he saw the $600,000 amount, my name, the space for my signature. Then he put it down and picked up the rejection letter for the $20,000 line of credit. He read it, his jaw tightening. He looked up at me. He didn't look shocked. He didn't look surprised. He just looked terribly, profoundly sad. "So," he said, his voice a low rumble. "It started." He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "I was afraid this day would come, Gabe. I truly was. I kept hoping Matt would grow up, that he'd find his own way." "He found a way, all right," I said, my voice thick with an anger that was so deep it felt cold. "He found his way into my file cabinet. He used his mother's death to get my mother's maiden name. He's been planning this, John." Peterson nodded slowly. "They get desperate. The children. They always get desperate." He stood up and walked, not to a desk drawer, but to a massive fireproof safe built into the wall, hidden behind a framed painting. He spun the combination lock, the clicks precise and silent. The heavy door swung open. Inside wasn't cash. It was rows and rows of thick-bound ledgers. He pulled one out. It was a dark blue, hard-bound volume, embossed with gold letters. It didn't say Gabe Hayes. It said the Hayes Alice Trust. He placed the massive file on his desk, right next to the flimsy, fraudulent mortgage application. The contrast was stark. One was a desperate lie. The other was the $50 million truth. "Well, Gabe," Peterson said, opening the cover, "Alice was a brilliant woman. She knew this might happen. She insisted on a few safeguards." He looked up at me. "She called it the character clause." He ran his hand over the heavy, expensive paper inside. "The question is, Gabe, are you ready to use it? Let me explain something to you. Something my son Matt never knew. Something I never told a single soul in our small Oregon town. To Matt, to Nicole, to my neighbors, I'm just Gabe Hayes, the retired engineer from the aerospace plant, the guy who lives on his pension and his 401k, the man who drives a 20-year-old truck and spends his mornings trying to fix a broken coffee maker. That's the lie. Or rather, it's the cover story. A cover story Alice and I agreed on more than 30 years ago. You see, I wasn't just an engineer. I was a very, very good one. Back in the early 80s, long before I took the steady job at the big plant, I was working in my own garage. I was tinkering, obsessed with a single complex problem: high-temperature friction in turbine engines. And I solved it. I developed a new metal alloy, a ceramic metallic composite that could withstand temperatures that would turn ordinary steel to soup. It was lightweight, self-lubricating, and nearly indestructible. I patented it. Hayes Alloy 7B. I thought I might sell the patent for a few $1,000s, maybe buy Alice a new car. Instead, a defense contractor, one of the biggest in the world, bought it. They didn't just buy the patent. They bought my life. They bought my silence. They bought my future. They use that alloy in everything now: jet engines, medical implants, deep-sea drilling equipment. The check they gave me. I still remember Alice and I sitting at our kitchen table, the same table Matt and Nicole had just sat at, just staring at it. It had so many zeros I thought it was a typo. $50 million. Alice and I sat at that table for 3 days. We didn't sleep. We just talked. We could have bought a mansion. We could have bought a private island. We could have become, well, we could have become people like Nicole. But Alice, she was the smart one. She was the foundation. "Gabe," she'd said, her hand covering mine on that life-changing check, "this isn't money. This is poison. It's a curse if we let it be. It will ruin Matt. It will make him weak. We can't let him know. Not until he's a man. Not until he's earned the knowledge of it." So, we made a decision. We called Peterson. We created the Hayes Alice Trust, an irrevocable trust. We locked the money away. We put it in investments so secure, so anonymous, that it just grew silently in the dark. And we went on living. I took the steady, respectable job at the aerospace plant. We lived on my salary. We drove Fords. We saved for Matt's college in a normal savings account. We lived on my pension. We lived on my 401k. We lived a good, simple American life. Matt and Nicole, they had just torn my office apart. They had stolen my pension statements. They had stolen my 401k reports. They had stolen my tax returns. They thought they had found my treasure. They were fighting over the bait. They were trying to steal the few $100,000 I kept in my decoy accounts, while the $50 million whale swam silently in the depths beneath their feet. And they had no idea. Peterson turned a page in the heavy blue ledger. "And here it is," he said, tapping the paper. "Section 4, Article B, the Alice Hayes Character Clause." His voice was flat, professional, as he read the legal text that my brilliant wife had insisted upon. "The assets of this trust are designated primarily for the benefit of any and all grandchildren of the creators. The primary beneficiary, Matthew Hayes." He paused. "May only assume a managerial role as executive of the trust upon demonstrating." Peterson stopped reading and looked up at me over the rim of his expensive glasses. "Demonstrating the highest standard of financial responsibility and moral character." I just stared at him. Highest moral character. Peterson closed the massive book. The sound was a heavy, final thud that seemed to echo in the silent, expensive office. "Your son, Gabe," he said, in his desperate, greedy, and frankly stupid attempt to steal what he thought was a few $100,000, has just legally proven that he is morally and financially unfit to ever touch 50 million. The irony was so bitter I could taste it, like ashes in my mouth. By trying to steal the scraps from my table, he had just set fire to his own inheritance. He had violated the one rule Alice had put in place to protect him from himself. He had failed the test. "So," I finally asked, my voice a low growl, "what do we do?" "We do nothing," Peterson said. His eyes were cold. "We let them. They've committed fraud. They've committed identity theft. They think they're holding all the cards. We let them play their hand. We wait for them to make their next move. I nodded. I stood up. I felt heavier, but also clearer. I drove the 90 minutes back to my house. The anger from the morning was gone. It had been replaced by something cold, something hard, something determined. I had lost my son. Not to death, like I lost Alice, but to this, to weakness, to greed, to whatever that woman Nicole had turned him into. I pulled my old truck up the gravel driveway. It was dark now. The porch light was off. The house looked dark and cold. But there was someone waiting for me. A man. He was standing in the shadows by my front door. My heart jumped into my throat. Was it Matt? Had he come back? The man stepped forward into the single beam of my headlights. He wasn't Matt. He was wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit him quite right, and he was holding a stack of papers. He looked bored. "Gabriel Hayes?" he called out, his voice flat. "Yes." He walked forward, pulled a single document from the stack, and pushed it into my chest. "You've been served." I looked down at the papers in my hand. The fluorescent white of the paper glowed in the dark. My son and his wife weren't just trying to steal from me. They were suing me. I stood there in the dark. The man's footsteps crunched on the gravel as he walked back to his car and disappeared into the night. He had left the papers in my hand. They were still warm from his grasp. I didn't move. I just stood there under the single weak bulb of my porch light, the smell of the damp pines thick in the air, and I looked down at what he had given me. A summons, a legal document from the state of Oregon, county of Clackamas. Nicole Hayes and Matthew Hayes, plaintiffs, versus Gabriel Hayes, defendant. Plaintiffs, defendant. My son was suing me. My hands, the hands of an engineer, hands that had built engines and fixed transmissions, they were shaking. I fumbled with the staple, tearing the paper a little. I skipped past all the legal boilerplate, looking for the what, and then I saw it. Seek monetary damages in the amount of $600,000. 600,000. The number just hung there on the page. It didn't seem real. It was an abstraction, a string of zeros. It was the price of the house they wanted. They were suing me for the house. They were suing me for the right to own something they couldn't afford. I felt a bitter, dry laugh try to escape my throat. Of course. This was the next move. This was the, "You will regret this." But then I kept reading, and the laughter died, because it wasn't just about the money. Oh God, if only it had been just about the money. I read the next line. And furthermore, petition this court for an emergency hearing to establish a conservatorship over the person and estate of Gabriel Hayes, citing advanced age and cognitive impairment. Cognitive impairment. Conservatorship. The words hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. They weren't just trying to get a house. They were trying to get me. They were trying to take my life. I stumbled back and sat hard on the old porch swing Alice loved. The chains groaned under my weight. I read on, my eyes scanning the sworn affidavit attached to the petition. The lies. They were so detailed. First, Nicole's statement. It was poetry. It was fiction. I, Nicole Hayes, being of sound mind, do swear that my father-in-law, Gabriel Hayes, did on numerous occasions, including but not limited to Thanksgiving of 2023 and Christmas of 2024, verbally promise to take care of our future and buy us a home as a family asset. Asterisk. I gripped the paper. Thanksgiving. I remembered Thanksgiving. I remembered telling Matt he needed to start contributing more to his own 401k, not just relying on the fact that I had one. I never, ever promised them a house. Her lies continued. Relying on this repeated promise from my father-in-law, she wrote, "My husband and I made significant, irreversible financial decisions. I left my part-time job as a consultant to prepare for our new home, and we placed a substantial non-refundable deposit on the property, all based on his word. Asterisk. A non-refundable deposit. That was the hook. They were claiming promissory estoppel, a legal trap. They were saying they had been financially damaged by a promise I never made. I never promised them a dime. Alice and I had one rule, one single, ironclad rule. You make your own way. We gave Matt an education. We gave him love. We gave him a stable home. We never, ever promised him a free ride. And he knew it. But the petition wasn't finished. The next page was worse. It was the request for the conservatorship. It was Matt's sworn statement, or at least it had his signature on it. The words sounded like pure Nicole. My father, Gabriel Hayes, has shown significant signs of cognitive decline over the past year. Asterisk. I read on, my stomach churning. He has become dangerously forgetful. He often misplaces his keys and wallet. He has become reclusive, refusing to see family or friends. He has exhibited paranoia, accusing us of things we have not done. Asterisk. They were using my quiet, frugal life as evidence of self-neglect. They were twisting my privacy into isolation. And then came the final dagger. The most alarming sign of his impairment. Matt's statement read, is his complete lack of memory regarding his promise to buy us our home. He became agitated and confused when we presented him with the paperwork, as if he had no recollection of our many conversations. We are not angry. We are terrified. We are afraid he is a danger to himself. We fear he will, in his confused state, mismanage or give away the assets he worked his whole life to build. Asterisk. I dropped the papers. They scattered across the old wooden planks of the porch. I finally understood. This wasn't about a house. The house was just the prize. This was about control, my refusal, my simple, firm no. They weren't seeing it as a boundary. They were twisting it. They were painting it as proof that I was insane. They were building a legal cage for me. Declare me incompetent. Seize control of my estate. The 401k, the pension, the small townhouse they thought was my only asset. They would get the $600,000 and everything else. I would be a prisoner, locked away in a nursing home, legally dead while they drained my life's work. And the beauty of their plan, the truly evil genius of it, was that the very act of me fighting back, of me getting angry, of me saying they were conspiring against me, would just be more proof of my paranoia. They had backed me into a corner. I sat there for a long time, the cold night air seeping into my bones. The porch swing was silent. They thought they were dealing with a forgetful, simple old man. They thought they had trapped me. They had just made the single biggest mistake of their lives. They thought I was weak. They forgot. I'm an engineer. I don't just fix machines. I find weak points. I analyze systems. And I take them apart, piece by piece. This lawsuit wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration of war. I bent down, my knees cracking in protest. I gathered the scattered papers, every single one. I put them in order. Then I went inside, locked my door, and picked up the phone. Peterson Law Offices, the answering service said. This is Gabriel Hayes, I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. Get me John Peterson. I don't care what time it is. I don't care if he's in bed. Get him on the phone. Now. It was happening. I was in Peterson's office at 9 a.m. sharp the next morning. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the night in my old recliner, the lawsuit papers spread out on the floor under the lamplight. I just stared at them, watching the words blur. Cognitive impairment, danger to himself, conservatorship. The anger from the night before had cooled. It had settled into something hard, heavy, and cold inside my chest. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was procedure. I was an engineer. I had a complex problem in front of me, a system designed for maximum destruction, and I needed to figure out how to take it apart. When I walked into Peterson's office, he didn't offer me coffee. He didn't ask how I was. He was all business. His massive mahogany desk was clear, except for a single slim manila folder. He looked like he'd been up all night too. "You were right to call me, Gabe," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I made some calls. I keep a private investigator on retainer for sensitive family matters. He's very fast and very thorough." Peterson opened the folder. He didn't need to build suspense. He just stated the facts. "Your son Matt and his wife Nicole," he said, "are not just greedy. They are desperate. And desperate people, Gabe, are stupid, and they are dangerous." He slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. "This is a summary report." He started with Nicole. Her lifestyle, the one she's so proud of. It's a house of cards built on debt. I picked up the paper. I'm an engineer. I'm good with numbers. But these numbers, they didn't make sense. It was a credit report summary. "That's not a typo, Gabe," Peterson said, watching my face. "You're reading it correctly. Your daughter-in-law, Nicole, is currently carrying $83,000 in outstanding, high-interest credit card debt. $83,000. I thought of the $80 bottle of wine she'd brought to my house, the designer handbag, the constant, casual, cruel mentions of trips I couldn't afford, restaurants I'd never heard of. It was all a performance, paid for with money she never had. "It's all here," Peterson continued, tapping the paper. "American Express, Visa, Nordstrom, Saks Fifth Avenue, 3 different furniture store cards. She's been living like a millionaire. The problem is, as far as we can tell, she doesn't have a job. Not one she's declared taxes on anyway. She wasn't just bragging. She was panicked. She wasn't just spending. She was drowning." "But Matt," I said, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. "Matt has a good job. He's a regional sales manager. He must make good money. He can't be okay with this." Peterson's face didn't change. He shook his head slowly. He slid a second piece of paper across the desk. This one was a printout of what looked like an internal company memo. "Matt had a good job," Peterson corrected me. "He was terminated 6 months ago." I stared at the paper. Terminated. Fired. "Why?" I whispered. "Embezzlement," Peterson said. The word was ugly, clinical. He was caught skimming $5,000 from the corporate expense account. Falsifying receipts. His company didn't want the bad press. They're a family company. They fired him quietly. They gave him 6 months to pay the money back before they pressed criminal charges. The pieces fell into place. Not with a click, but with the sound of a building collapsing. 6 months. He had been unemployed for 6 months. He had been pretending to go to work every morning. He had been coming to my house, eating my food, lying to my face. The 6-month deadline to pay back the stolen money. It was probably right now. The stolen 401k statements, the fraudulent line of credit, the lawsuit. This wasn't about ambition. This wasn't about living their best life. This was about survival. "The house," I said, the realization hitting me. "The $600,000 house." "Exactly," Peterson said. "It's not a dream. It's a lifeline. They're bankrupt, Gabe. They're about to lose everything. They're not just trying to buy a house with your money. They're trying to use you. My investigator believes the plan was to get a massive mortgage in your name, immediately take a cash-out equity loan against the property to pay their debts, and then most likely let the house go into foreclosure, destroying your credit, not theirs. A drowning man, pulling his own father underwater to use him as a flotation device. I thought about the lawsuit, the claim that I was the one who was cognitively impaired, the accusation that I was the one who was forgetful and a danger to my own finances. They weren't just attacking me. They were projecting. They were accusing me of their sins. I looked at Peterson. "They've stolen my identity. They've lied to the court in a sworn affidavit. They've tried to defraud a bank. And Matt embezzled. Yes, Peterson said. So, I said, feeling the cold engineering logic return, my voice flat. They're not just immoral. They're criminals. Peterson nodded. They are. And they've just given us all the ammunition we need. They've handed us the rope. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked down at the city. All those people living their lives, completely unaware of the poison flowing just beneath the surface. Good, I said, turning back to Peterson, because they don't know who they're dealing with. They think I'm a forgetful old man living on a pension. They think I'm weak. They think they've trapped me. I looked at the folder on his desk. The Hayes Alice Trust. The $50 million secret. They have no idea what's coming for them. Peterson allowed himself a thin, cold smile. No, Gabe, he said. They really don't. The Clackamas County Courthouse is not an impressive building. It's a block of beige concrete and dark glass, built in the 70s, and it smells like stale coffee and floor wax. It's a place for speeding tickets and property disputes, not high-stakes drama. But as I walked through the metal detector, my old belt buckle setting it off, it felt like the Supreme Court. Peterson was already there, waiting for me. He wasn't carrying his massive blue ledger. He just had a slim, mean-looking briefcase. He nodded at me, his face like stone. Gabe, you ready for this? I'm ready, John. Good, he said, because they're already here, and they're putting on a show. We pushed through the double wooden doors into courtroom 3B. It was exactly as I'd pictured. Fluorescent lights humming overhead, worn wooden benches, the state flag of Oregon hanging limply next to the judge's empty chair. And then I saw them. They were sitting at the plaintiff's table, side by side, my son Matt and his wife Nicole. And they were in mourning. I stopped. I actually stopped in the aisle. Nicole was dressed head to toe in a severe, expensive-looking black suit. Not navy, not charcoal. Black. Funeral black. Her hair was pulled back in a tight, joyless bun. She had a single strand of pearls on. Alice had a strand just like that. The sight of it made my stomach clench. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring straight ahead, her expression one of profound, tragic sadness. In her hand, she held a small, white, lace-edged handkerchief. Every few seconds, she would lift it, not to her eyes, but to the corners of her eyes. A delicate, practiced dab. Dab, dab, dab. There were no tears. It was just the gesture. A performance for the judge, for the court, for anyone watching. And Matt, my son, he was in a dark suit too. His face was pale. He looked somber. He looked like a man burdened by a terrible, necessary responsibility. The devoted son forced to make the hardest decision of his life. He saw me. His eyes met mine for a second. I saw no guilt. I saw no shame. I saw pity. He pitied me. He genuinely believed the lie they had constructed. He had convinced himself that he was the hero of this story, the man stepping in to save his poor, confused father from himself. The sheer, staggering arrogance of it almost made me smile. Their lawyer, a slick-looking man in a suit that was too shiny, leaned over and whispered something to Nicole. She nodded, her face a perfect mask of sorrow, and dabbed her eyes again. They were mourning me. They were sitting in a courtroom, dressed for my funeral, trying to bury me while I was still standing right in front of them. I walked past them, my work boots echoing on the linoleum floor. I sat down at the defendant's table next to Peterson. I didn't look at them again. The bailiff stepped forward. All rise. The performance was about to begin. Their lawyer, Mr. Snyder, stood up. The plaintiffs called Nicole Hayes to the stand. The entire courtroom watched her. She moved as if she were walking on glass. Her steps were slow, her head bowed. She held that ridiculous lace handkerchief in one hand. She looked like the perfect image of a grieving daughter, forced to do something terrible, but necessary. She was a professional. This was her Super Bowl. She took the oath, her voice a soft, trembling whisper. I do. Her lawyer approached her with a look of profound, paternal sympathy. Mrs. Hayes, he said, his voice dripping with compassion, I know this is incredibly difficult for you. Can you please tell the court, in your own words, about your relationship with your father-in-law? Nicole looked at me. She actually looked right at me, her eyes brimming with what a stranger would call sadness. I knew what it was. It was triumph. Gabe, Dad, she began, her voice cracking perfectly on the word Dad. He was the kindest man I've ever known. When I married Matt, he welcomed me. He is my father. She paused. Dab, dab, dab with the handkerchief. But over the last year, especially since Alice passed, he's changed. Changed how, Mrs. Hayes? Snyder prompted gently. He's just not there anymore, she whispered, as if the admission pained her. He's confused. He's so forgetful. And he's a danger to himself. I gripped the edge of the defendant's table. Peterson put a hand on my arm, a silent weight. A danger? Snyder asked, his brow furrowed in concern. Those are strong words. Can you give the court an example? Oh, God, she said, closing her eyes as if reliving a trauma. Last month, Matt and we always check on him. We try to. He gets so agitated when we do, but we worry. We went over and the house was cold and it smelled of gas. She was lying. A complete, total fabrication. My stove is electric. He had turned on the gas stove, the burner, but not the flame, she sobbed. He was just sitting in his chair in the living room, reading the paper. The entire kitchen was filling with gas. If we hadn't gotten there, she broke down into a quiet, theatrical sob into her handkerchief. Matt, at his table, put his head in his hands, playing his part, the traumatized son. That's horrifying, Snyder said, letting the image hang in the air. And has there been anything else? He gets lost, she said, her voice small. He's lived in this town for 45 years, but last week he went to the Roundup Cafe, a place he's been to 1,000 times, and he called Matt. He was crying. He was disoriented. He said he didn't know where he was. He didn't know how to get home. The diner. She was twisting it. She was twisting the day my entire town turned their backs on me into proof of my insanity. The audacity was breathtaking. So, Snyder said, pacing, he's forgetful. He's a danger to himself. Now let's talk about this lawsuit. Your petition claims he made a financial promise to you. Can you explain that? Oh, it wasn't about a house, she said, shaking her head as if the very idea was distasteful. It was about his words, his and Alice's. For years, they always told Matt, we're saving this for you. We're building this for you. When we're gone, the family will be taken care of. She looked at the judge, her eyes wide and sincere. Your Honor, Gabe promised us. He promised he would help us. He promised he would invest in us. We trusted that promise. It was a family promise. And what happened when you tried to act on that promise? Snyder asked. Nicole's face darkened with a new, different kind of sadness, the sadness of a victim. We found our dream home, the home we wanted for our future children. We were so excited. We brought him the paperwork. It was just a formality. We thought he'd be happy for us. And was he? She took a sharp, shaky breath. He was a different person. His eyes, they were cold. He accused us. He accused Matt of trying to steal from him. He called me names. I I can't repeat in court. Another lie. I hadn't called her anything. I had just said no. But no wasn't dramatic enough for her story. He threw us out, she said, her voice rising in remembered panic. He threw us out of his house. He was violent in his refusal. He wasn't confused anymore. He was mean. That's when we knew. That's when we realized the man we loved, our father, was gone, replaced by this angry, paranoid stranger. She had done it. She had painted the perfect picture. I wasn't just a forgetful old man. I was now a volatile, angry, paranoid old man, a danger to myself and to others. Snyder let her words hang in the air. He walked back to his table, then turned as if struck by a final, noble thought. So, to be absolutely clear, Mrs. Hayes, this petition, this lawsuit, it's not about money, is it? It's not about the $600,000. This was the moment, the climax of her performance. She turned her gaze from her lawyer to the judge. The judge, a woman in her 60s with intelligent, tired eyes, looked back at her, unblinking. Nicole's fake tears finally, truly welled up and spilled over. Her voice was a masterpiece of broken devotion. "Money, Your Honor," she choked out. "How could this possibly be about money? We're his family. We love him. We just want to protect him. We just want to get him the help he needs. We want to manage his affairs so he can't hurt himself, so he can live out his years in safety and dignity." And then she went for the kill, the final vicious twist of the knife. And, she said, her voice breaking completely, "we want to fulfill his late wife's greatest wish." I felt my blood run cold. "Alice," Nicole whispered, as if speaking of a saint. "Alice always said that her only job in this world was making sure her family was taken care of, that Matt was safe. We're just trying to do what she would have wanted." I closed my eyes. The desecration was complete. She had taken the memory of my wife, the memory of Alice's love and strength, and she had twisted it. She had forged it into a weapon to justify her own bottomless pathological greed. She had painted Alice, my Alice, as her accomplice. I heard a sniffle from the public gallery. Someone was buying it. I looked at Matt. He was sitting at his table, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking slightly. He was nodding. He was actually nodding along to her story. He had heard the lie so many times, he now believed it himself. Nicole dabbed her eyes one last time. "We just want our father back," she whispered. She stepped down from the stand, a perfect portrait of tragic, beautiful love. The courtroom was silent. The judge made a note. Snyder looked at Peterson, his expression smug. "Your witness." But Peterson didn't stand up. "Not yet," he said, and he just looked at me. I nodded. It was my turn. Snyder sat down, looking like a cat that had just swallowed a canary. He was smug. "Your witness," he said to Peterson. I felt my hands grip the wood of the defendant's table. I expected Peterson to call me. I expected him to put me on the stand to deny the lies, to deny the gas stove, to deny the violent outburst. Peterson stood up slowly. He was a big man, but he moved with a quiet, deliberate grace. He wasn't flashy like Snyder. He was granite. The defense calls Matthew Hayes to the stand. A wave of confusion rippled through the courtroom. I heard Nicole's sharp intake of breath. Matt, my son, looked up, his face a mask of complete shock. Snyder shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Hayes is my client. He is a plaintiff. The defense cannot call my client as their witness." Peterson didn't even look at him. He addressed the judge, a stern-looking woman named Judge Evans. "Your Honor," Peterson said, his voice a calm rumble, "Mr. Hayes is not just a plaintiff seeking monetary damages. He is the proposed conservator. This hearing is to determine his father's mental capacity, and if that capacity is found lacking, to determine if Mr. Hayes is a suitable person to manage his father's life and estate. His character, his motives, and his judgment are not just relevant. They are the central issue of this entire proceeding. I intend to examine those motives. Judge Evans looked at Snyder. This is a conservatorship hearing, Mr. Snyder, not a simple civil suit. I'm allowing it. Objection overruled. Mr. Hayes, take the stand. I watched my son. I watched him walk that long, lonely path from the plaintiff's table to the witness box. He looked small in his dark, somber suit. He passed right by me. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He placed his hand on the Bible. I thought, he's about to lie on the same Bible his mother read from every Sunday. He swore the oath, his voice barely a whisper. I do. He sat down. He looked terrified. Peterson approached the box. He didn't attack. His voice was soft, almost kind. Mr. Hayes, you've just heard your wife's testimony. It was very moving. You must be terribly worried about your father. Matt visibly relaxed. This was familiar territory. The script. Yes, sir, he said, nodding, finding his footing. We both are. He's just not the man he was. He's confused. He's angry. We're scared for him. Scared for him? Peterson repeated, nodding. And you're worried about his finances? That, in his confused state, he might mismanage them? Yes. He worked his whole life for what he has, Matt said, gaining confidence. We just want to protect that. Protect his legacy. It's what my mother Alice would have wanted. I felt my blood turn to ice. He dared. He dared to speak her name. He dared to use her as a shield for this. I looked at Peterson. Peterson's face was stone. So, Mr. Hayes, Peterson continued, his voice still soft, all of your actions, this lawsuit, this petition to have your father stripped of his rights, all of this comes from a place of love, of concern. Yes, Matt said, his voice firm now. 100%. We just want to help him. Help him, Peterson murmured. He paced a step. Then he turned, and the kindness was gone. His voice was no longer a rumble. It was a blade. Let's talk about the specific ways you've tried to help him. Peterson walked to his briefcase. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. Mr. Hayes, I'm holding a document from Bank of America, dated October 15th of this year. It's a rejection letter for a $20,000 home equity line of credit in your father's name. Can you tell the court who filed this application? Snyder was on his feet. Objection. Relevance. What does this have to do with... Your Honor, Peterson cut him off. It has everything to do with it. It speaks directly to the plaintiff's pattern of behavior regarding his father's finances. Judge Evans held up a hand. I'll allow it. It is highly relevant. Answer the question, Mr. Hayes. Matt was white. He was staring at the paper in Peterson's hand, as if it were a snake. I don't recall. I don't know anything about that. You don't recall? Peterson's voice was incredulous. That's strange, because the application was filed at 7:42 p.m. on Tuesday, October 15th. According to your own wife's testimony, that was the very same day your father supposedly had a violent, paranoid episode and threw you out of his house. You must have been very concerned for his finances that night. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained, the judge said, but she was leaning forward now, her eyes fixed on Matt. Just ask the questions, Mr. Peterson. Let me refresh your memory, Mr. Hayes. Peterson continued, his voice like ice. This application was filed online. It used your father's correct Social Security number, his correct date of birth, and for the security question, his mother's maiden name, Kovac. Is that a name you are familiar with, Mr. Hayes? I watched my son's face. I watched it crumble. He knew he was caught. He looked at Nicole, a desperate, silent plea. Her face was frozen, her mask of grief replaced by one of pure panic. I might have, Matt stammered, his voice cracking. I was trying to check on his accounts, to see if he was okay. I was worried someone else might be stealing from him. You were checking on his accounts by applying for a $20,000 loan in his name, without his permission? Peterson asked, his voice booming in the small courtroom. Is that what helping looks like, Mr. Hayes? Or is that what the Oregon State Penal Code calls identity theft? Objection! Snyder screamed, his face purple. Sustained! The judge snapped. The jury will disregard that last comment. Mr. Peterson, you are on a very thin wire. My apologies, Your Honor, Peterson said, not looking sorry at all. He put the bank letter down. Let's move on. Let's talk about other ways you've helped your father. Matt was breathing hard now, his knuckles white on the railing of the witness box. Mr. Hayes, Peterson said, let's go back 1 week further, to October 10th. Your father was at a cardiology appointment in Portland for most of the day. Is that correct? I believe so. And while he was gone, you and your wife were at his house, weren't you? Matt's eyes darted to Nicole again. We stopped by to pick up his mail. He'd been forgetting. Forgetting the mail, Peterson said, nodding. Very thoughtful. The defense submits this affidavit. He handed a paper to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. It's a sworn statement from Mrs. Agnes Henderson, your father's next-door neighbor of 45 years. In it, she testifies that she saw you and your wife, Nicole, inside your father's home for, and I quote, nearly a full hour. She also testifies that when your wife left, she was carrying a beige tote bag that was, quote, stuffed so full of papers, I thought the handles would break. Peterson turned back to Matt. The kindness was gone. The civility was gone. This was an execution. Mr. Hayes, he thundered, were you helping your father when you broke into his file cabinet? Were you protecting him when you stole his 401k statements, his private pension documents, and his personal tax returns? We were worried, Matt shouted, his voice breaking. We were looking for his will. We were afraid. We were afraid in his confused state he might have lost it or changed it. So you admit you took the documents, Peterson said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. No, we were just organizing. Organizing, Peterson repeated. A noble act. And this lawsuit? This petition to have him declared insane? Is that also organizing? We had to, Matt pleaded, his eyes now on the judge. He's sick. He doesn't know what he's doing. We're just trying to manage his affairs. Ah, Peterson said. His affairs. Let's talk about that. Mr. Hayes, you have a good job, don't you? Regional sales manager at John Deere. Matt seemed to grab onto this like a lifeline, a topic he understood. Yes, he said, straightening up slightly. Yes, I do. You sell tractors, farm equipment, a solid, respectable job, an honest living. Yes. Is it still correct, Mr. Hayes? Matt just stared at him. Oh, what? Peterson walked back to his briefcase. He pulled out another document. Mr. Hayes, were you not terminated, fired, from your position at John Deere 6 months ago, on May 1st, for embezzlement? The courtroom exploded. Snyder was on his feet, screaming, Objection! Objection! Relevance! Character assassination! Objection! But it was too late. The bomb had gone off. The word was hanging in the air. Embezzlement. Peterson ignored the lawyer and threw the documents onto the clerk's desk. Your Honor, the defense submits Mr. Hayes's termination letter from John Deere and the signed restitution agreement where he admits to falsifying expense reports and stealing $5,000 from his employer. Order! The judge yelled, banging her gavel. Order in my court! Peterson waited until the noise died down, his face a mask of cold fury. He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, it is entirely relevant. The plaintiffs have built their entire case on the foundation that they are concerned for Mr. Hayes's welfare. We are here to prove, with this evidence, that this case has nothing to do with concern. It has nothing to do with love. It is about desperation. It is about bankruptcy. It is about debt." I looked at Matt, my son. He wasn't the beautiful son anymore. He wasn't the loving protector. He was just a thief, a small and pathetic thief. He had his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I looked at Nicole. Her mask was gone. She was not looking at her husband with love or sympathy. She was staring at him with a look of such pure, unadulterated hatred, a look that said, "You didn't just fail, you got caught." The judge slammed her gavel again. "Order! Mr. Snyder, I am overruling your objection. This evidence speaks directly to the plaintiff's motive, and I suggest we take a long recess." She looked at Matt, then at Nicole, her eyes filled with disgust. "Because right now, your case has a catastrophic credibility problem." The courtroom was chaos, but the judge wasn't finished. She looked at the plaintiff's table. "This hearing is concluded," she said. She stood up. "And furthermore, based on the testimony and evidence of embezzlement, perjury under oath, conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and the filing of a false, malicious report to Adult Protective Services, this court is referring this entire matter to the District Attorney's Office for a full criminal investigation." Crack! The gavel fell. It was done. I watched a bailiff walk over to Matt. He was no longer a witness. He was a defendant. Nicole was frozen, her mouth open, the shriek stillborn on her lips. She had lost. She had lost the house. She had lost the 50 million. She had lost everything. Peterson put his hand on my back. "It's over, Gabe." I nodded. I stood up. I didn't look at them again. I didn't look at my son. I didn't look at the ruin I had built and the ruin he had become. I just walked out of the courtroom. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors and walked out into the bright, cold, ordinary sunlight. I sold the house in Oregon. I sold the old truck. I let the lawyers and the trust handle the rest. I used my pension, the money I had earned, the decoy money, and I bought a small 2-bedroom condo in San Diego. The place Alice and I always said we'd retire to, but never did. The $50 million trust? It's still there. Peterson manages it. It goes to engineering scholarships now. It goes to the university where I developed the alloy. It builds things. It doesn't destroy them. Matt and Nicole, they're facing multiple felony charges. They declared bankruptcy. The last I heard, Nicole left him. She finally realized you can't get blood from a stone. I sit on my new balcony now. I can smell the salt from the ocean. I'm drinking coffee from a brand new machine. It works perfectly every time. I lost my son, but I kept my word to Alice. I protected our legacy, and I am finally at peace. My wife and I tried to teach our son the value of hard work by hiding our wealth. Do you think we made a mistake? Tell me what you truly think in the comments below.